Hey everybody, my name's Daryl. Welcome back to Journey to VR. This week, I'm going to continue animating objects in my scene using the motion graphics toolset. I have this idea about having some graffiti that's spray printed on a wall come to life as you approach it, and that's exactly what we're going to do procedurally using the motion graphics toolset. So thanks for taking the time to check it out, everybody. Cheers. All right, everybody, so here we are inside of the reality captured environment, and what I want to do is I want to take this graffiti logo that's spray painted on the wall and have it come to life using the motion graphics toolset. So the idea is as you approach something in the VR experience, it'll basically pull off the wall and start moving around like a really cool kind of 3D screensaver and sort of be tied into the music a bit and things like that. So it should be pretty cool when it's all done, and it's a great demo on how to work with the motion graphics toolkit to do some procedural animation. And we're really going to be using just some simple rotations and some sines and some cosines to get some really kind of elaborate animation happening. So the way I built that tag was it actually started off as some 3D geometry that came into Maya with the scalable vector graphics tool. I extruded it out and then just pushed and pulled on some of the edges to kind of give it this sort of relief look to it that's sort of intersecting with itself. So what we want to do is we want to create a motion graphics network out of this. Now, if you remember last week, I talked about the selection order being very important. So I've got these guys laid out so that it will basically spell Journey to VR in the motion graphics network. So we'll just grab the R up to the J and create a new motion graphics network out of that guy. We'll call it VR, and we'll distribute it across the X-axis. So as soon as we do that, you can see that we now have in our scene here, we've got the waiter node and this distribution node. So the distribution node is telling me that we've distributed this guy 13 times across the X-axis, and that's because I selected 13 objects in my outliner, but they're all the letter R, which isn't what we want. It was the last letter that I selected, obviously. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to the waiter node and just add an ID node to that. So as soon as I do that, you can now see that we have Journey to VR dropped out there, put the ID count to 13 as it should automatically. The problem with this is that they're going down the wrong axis. I want everything sort of lined up facing toward the staircase down the Z-axis. So how do we do that? Really straightforward. We'll go back over to the waiter node and add onto it a simple offset. So we'll add that offset in there. We'll rotate this by -90. And now at least they're facing the right direction, but they're still distributed the wrong axis. So we'll just do something like that and kind of push that out a little bit further so that it looks kind of cool. So that looks good. Want to get that spacing a little bit further apart there so that they're kind of spaced out there. Now this is good, it looks cool, but it's not really where I want it in my stage. I want it back a bit further. So we'll just use that offset node to just push that back in Z a little bit so that it's sort of hanging out where I want the action to kind of happen. So now that we've got that done, we want to start animating it. So the first set of animation that we're going to be doing is going to be all based on rotation. So we're going to set up some rotation stuff, then we're going to set up some translation stuff that will let me do zigzags down. And then finally, we'll create the system that lets us transition from the one that's moving to the one that's stuck to the wall. And it's really pretty straightforward. So that's really what we're going to be demoing here. And we'll also work with the audio node a bit. So hopefully you guys are ready for it. It's a pretty in-depth motion graphics demo, essentially. So what we're going to do is make a spinner. So how do you do that? Well, you jump over to the waiter node and you add the offset. In the offset node, there's several different modes. So what we want to do is switch it from being a basic offset to one that multiplies times time. So we're going to say, let's rotate this guy 10 degrees multiplied times time. And if we hit playback, what do we got? We've got some objects spinning around, looking cool, and they're spinning down their axis. Now, what I want to do is I want this to be like a clock. And I want it to be spinning around the clock either direction. And I also want to be able to tick-tock back and forth with sort of a sine movement as it rotates around the clock. So how do we do that? Well, it's really pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to start labeling this stuff, actually. So we'll call this one spinner. We're going to add in another offset node that's going to let me push this guy up a little bit more toward 12 o'clock. Imagine it's at the center of the clock now. So what we want to do is we want to add an offset node and then just rise that up in Y. So that looks cool. It's risen up in Y. And if we hit play, it's going to do something, but it's not going to do what I want. I don't want it spinning around its own axis. I want it spinning around the origin, almost like going out more like a circle. And I want this offset node to adjust the size. So we're just going to call this one something that's a little bit more meaningful than offset. We'll call it spinner size. And what we're going to do is, all we have to do is essentially switch the transform mode. So instead of being world on the size, we'll just switch it to local. And as soon as I do that and we hit play, that's the magic button, switching world to local in the transformation space. it now spins around whatever size I set, right? So if I put it down to 0, it's going to be back down to the origin. And then if I put it up to a high number, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it controls the size of the circle. Awesome. The problem that I have now is every one of these guys is moving at the same time. I actually want to build in a delay effect so that it sort of looks like the J is leading and the other letters are kind of trailing behind. So how do you do that? Well, all you have to do is go into the waiter and add onto it a delay node. Pretty straightforward. And let's just put that step to -1. And we'll just play it back now. So now you can see as it spins around, those guys are trailing, and the amount that they trail is based on the amount of delay that you dial in. So if you put it to 0, they're going to go back to having no delay, and then the larger the number, or in this case, the smaller the number, the longer the tail gets and the more delayed it starts to look. Pretty straightforward. Now, this is really pretty cool, right? Like, you can actually do some really fun things by getting extreme amounts of delay. Like, let's just jump our distribution up to something like, we'll double it. We'll put it to 26, so we have twice as many numbers in here. And as that guy's spinning around, at 10 degrees for every frame, that's cool. But watch what happens if I start to get extreme numbers of delay in here. It will actually start to stack up on top of itself and form little arms, kind of. So as I start to increase this guy, you can see now we've got it. Oop, I went a little too far there. I've got it down to 5 arms, right? If I go a little bit further, I can probably get it to 4. So you basically can play with these guys. Up there you go, there's 4, to get these really kind of fun vortex effects happening. And obviously you can animate all of this stuff on and off, right? So you can animate that step on so that it's spinning and then it forms into 4 arms, and then it spins tight into a chaotic thing and then forms into 3 or 5. So by playing around with the delay, you get these kind of nice, fun little stepped effects happening. So that's really pretty cool. So the next thing that we want to do, let's go ahead and get that down to being like -1, back to a trail here. The next thing that we want to do is we want to do some tick-tocking back and forth. So right now it's just spinning because we're using this offset that is the spinner offset that's just, multiplied times time. So if we put that back to 0, I'm going to add onto this another node that's going to let me do a tick-tock movement back and forth, basically using a sine wave tied to rotation. So that's done with the signal node. The signal node is a real workhorse inside of the motion graphics toolset. So, and it's got its own built-in stepping. So we're going to turn the stepping off because I want to use the delay stepping for that guy. So if we hit play on this, by default, you can see that it's just got this little bit of movement happening back and forth. It's got itself set to be just a noise. That's not what we want. We're worried about rotation. So what we're going to do is we're going to zero these guys out, and we're going to switch it to be a trig node, and we're going to give it some rotation around Z. So you can see, all right, cool, it's spinning around Z, but it's still got a problem. The problem is that it's spinning around its local axis again. It doesn't have that offset happening, and that's because of the order in which we've done this. It's where it sits in the chain of evaluation. So what we want to do is we want to drag that below our spinner size. So now that it's below the spinner size, it's going to get offset like that clock thing that we did before, and it's going to get built-in delay. So now if we go back here and watch it spin back and forth, you can see it ticks and it talks and it goes back and forth, and it leaves this nice little trail for us. And we can adjust the amount of delay, again, obviously using that delay if we wanted the trail to be shorter, a tighter movement. We can turn that guy down. And if we wanted to adjust the speed of the swing back and forth, well, all we have to do is go to that signal and come down here to the trig sections, and you can see there's a time scale. Time scale means speed. So if we turn that down to a low value, it's going to do the same movement, just very, very slow. And if we turn this up to a high value, it's going to tick around much, much faster. And then obviously if you wanted to get some cool stuff happening, you could overdrive this to something like 1,000, right? So now it's going to spin around really chaotically, and then it's going to stop and rest and then kind of slow down. So I'm going to just slow this around. So you can see it spins, it'll catch it up to itself at a second, and then do this little reset and then start spinning the other way. So really, really nice example, really simple stuff to do using the rotation nodes to get some cool stuff. And then obviously if we wanted to, we could go in here to our spinner, and while this is going on, we could introduce in, some overall rotation around. So it's spinning the whole time. So it'll have a little bit of lag. Over here, we can even crank this up to something a little bit higher, like, get something crazy going. And then you can go in here and play with that delay again, to find those sweet spots where it'll start to build up like little arms and things like that. Now, because we have a signal on there, doing kind of this chaotic thing, you know, it'll kind of strobe and strobe and strobe, and then it'll kind of rest itself off and build in some arm, and then it'll start spinning back out. So you can see it kind of built an arm of 2 or 3 there. So you can have a lot of fun with this stuff. Now let's just go ahead and put this back down to something a little bit better, something like that. And there, that looks really cool. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about translation. So that's one level of control that we have, basically spinning around, facing down the z-axis, if you will. So we're gonna turn off all this spinner stuff because I don't really care about that. Oops, we don't want to turn off that offset. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and start to play around with this using just some translate. So I want to do maybe some zigzags down, or try to get some ribbons that move around, and multiple ribbons and things like that. So again, the signal is going to be our tool of choice to do that. Now, the thing that's kind of nice about the signal is, we'll add this guy in here, is it's got a built-in step sizing and delay built into it. So the fact that this signal is above the delay node is okay, because I'm going to be using its inherently built-in delay controls to get the trailers doing what I want. So let's go ahead and, like I said before, it's always set up to be a 40 noise. You know, that's cool, right? Whatever, noise. Yay. That's not what I want, though. I want it to be trigs, because I like seeing sine waves and things. I don't know. It's a weird thing. It's my thing. Sine waves and cosine. So what we've got going on here is we've got this guy sort of moving, you know, back and forth, and it's going back and forth in Z too. So if we play this back now, what have we got? We've got a little bit of movement back and forth. We've got this Z stuff happening, and we can go ahead and we can, you know, if we want it to go faster, just increase the speed. If you want it to go slower, just drop the scale down. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just jump over to a preset here. And what this one does is it's got it kind of dialed in here where it's sort of got, you know, about 2 little ribbon effects happening, right? So this is what I'm talking about. You can get these really cool effects in this guy, and all we've got is just, you know, some positional. I'll hit stop so that there's actually updates here. So we've got some positional information happening. We'll maybe give it a little bit more in Z, just because I like it moving in and out too a bit. And the way you get these kind of cool effects is I've got a cosine on the X and a sine on the Y, and the Z is you play around with the step amount. So if we put this to like 100 and just hit playback on this guy, as it's playing back at 100, if I just hold down my control key, and we'll do interactive playback here, and start to you know, push these guys around, you can get it to be all these cool little patterns. Like it'll start to build these really fun little you know, patterns that get built in there. So you can get 1 ribbon, 2 ribbons, you can get triangle shapes with it. So these are all kind of cool things. And like I said before, that's cool. That's 3 ribbons, like boom, 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 3 of them going back and forth. You can do this, and you can, you know, you can animate between all of these things. Now, I'm obviously not setting keyframes. I'm just kind of moving the sliders around, but you get the idea of the variety of effects that you can get with this just by playing around with these guys. And then obviously if you go and put this down to a low value, you know, it's just going to be like a simple little trail on it. So it's really, really fun. You know, you can get these kind of cool effects happening very, very quickly with it. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is, you know, and then also don't forget that while this is happening, if you wanted to animate, you know, some size scale into that or something like that, you know, you can always do something like that. Now we're ultimately going to end up driving that with the size of these guys with an audio spectrum, but you know, just by having a little bit of size changing happening there, it's just so much fun, so cool. I love that. It looks dope. Dig it. All right, so let's go ahead and get that size off, and let's just start to bear with me here. I want to get that size scale off here. And what we're going to do is we're going to, oh, don't forget, you can all add another level of rotations too, right? Like, you know, add in rotations on that guy, spin him around, get this kind of stuff going, you know? It's like a weird snake in my space here. That's so cool. So what we want to do now is we want to animate this guy going to a rest position. So like, how do we animate this guy getting to a rest position? What we're going to do is we're going to create another motion graphics network out of the same letters. So we'll just create that guy. And what we're going to do on this one is, instead of having it being distributed across the x-axis like it is now, what we're going to do is we're going to go and just make it be the initial state, right? So you say initial state on this guy, and they all line up there. And it's got that same problem where we haven't added the ID node onto it. So we'll just go in here and we'll add that ID node on there. So now you can see that we've got this new MASH 8, which we could just call like OG or something, right? Actually, if I name it here, this is a great tip. If you name it up here, it will Well, it's supposed to rename those guys, but it didn't. That's fixed in extension 2. I'm running extension 1. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and merge this guy into this other network. So the blend is merge. It's the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drag and drop what the parent is. So that's automatically hooked up to this one that's moving around. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drag and drop in the OG into that guy. And now you can see as I drop this merge down, it will transition down into that effect. Pretty straightforward. Now, because this merge is happening above the ID node, it gets confused on the way to its that kind of snaky looking ribbon one that we've done. So all you have to do again is reorder things. So just put the ID above the merge and it'll fix that right up. So as soon as that ID gets above the merge now, you can see as we drop down from this guy, it transitions into that guy. So let's check out what that looks like as it plays back. So it's playing back. Imagine that you're in VR, you get close to it, and you jump over here to the merge and you just start to animate this guy up and off it goes. It gets pulled out and it turns into, whatever settings you had set on that other thing. So that's really fun. So to finish this off, what we're going to do is we're going to add onto this guy an audio node. So we'll go into this. We'll add in the audio node. So the audio node comes in. We need to add in a audio sound file. We also need to import into Maya the sound for it to be heard. So we'll just jump over here. You can see I have quite a few versions of this file going. That's pretty funny. And we'll just clamp down our time slider to arrange that's, sort of in there, and double check that our playback speed is set to real time so that we can actually hear the audio. Grab a headphone and that's pretty cool. So I can tune this guy up. Oh, I don't have a preset set for it. So let's just we'll lower that down a little bit here, and we're going to set this to be 13 bands, and we'll give it a little bit of filtering like that. So now if we play it back, and pretty cool. So you can play with this till your heart's content. I mean, obviously it's pretty sweet. Now this is pretty interesting. So this audio node is happening above the merge. So if I drop this down, I mean, that's just fun on its own. Looks like the bass is a little bit stronger than the treble on that audio node. So I'll just drop the bass down and pump the treble up so it's a little more even. Play with the clip a little bit. So now we'll bring this guy back in, start spinning around. Maybe go down here and play around with the delay a little bit more. We ran out of audio. All right, so the last thing that we have to do is just check this out inside of the Vive to make sure everything is looking cool, and we'll be using the VR plugin to do that. So we'll go ahead and we'll load up the VR plugin, and we'll hit play on this guy, which will get it loaded into the Vive, and I can just kind of clean my windows up here, and we'll mirror our display so you can get a sense of what the headset is actually seeing here. So as I pick this up, you can see that is what's going on in the environment. Oh yeah. So this looks cool. The Journey to VR logo on the wall looks awesome. Obviously, I'm inside of this motion graphics animation that's happening. So that's probably not going to feel so good. Let's go ahead and hit play and see what happens on that guy. Yeah, so as this is playing around, I'm just engulfed inside of this logo, and it's a little chaotic. Let me see what happens if I step back a few feet here and what it looks like once I get back over here. So when I'm standing up and I'm back here, this is actually this looks pretty sweet. Now keep in mind that when you have the headset on, your field of view is much larger than when you get in the perspective. Vertically and horizontally, you're getting like 110 degrees field field of view, and it's not this kind of forced pinch perspective you get when you have a big field of view in Maya's viewport. So it feels really good and really natural. I think the effect is probably a little bit big. After looking at this scene, and I'm definitely going to have to go back and make some modifications and some changes to it. But I can't wait to join this in with the audio. So when the audio node is on that lead object and kind of moving around and changing from the left to the right, giving you these kind of spatial cues with the audio, I think it's going to be really, really pretty cool and pretty fun. So I'd just like to finish off by saying thank you so much for watching these guys. The Journey to VR videos are so much fun for me to make. If you haven't had the opportunity yet to go to the area blog, Journey to VR, please go there and check it out. Every week we're putting up a couple of things that I'm doing, as well as a couple of things that my good friend April's doing. She's been writing articles along the journey with me, and this week she's got an awesome article from Hammerhead VR about directing eyes. So please make sure if you haven't and you're watching this on YouTube or Vimeo, to link through to the Autodesk area and Journey to VR to check out all the other content that we've been assembling for you guys. Thanks again for checking it out. We really appreciate it. Cheers, everybody.